The wind howled across the empty plains of Wyoming Territory. It was January 1869, the kind of night when even wolves stayed close to their dens. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets, burying fences and swallowing sound. Rhett Callahan pushed the cabin door shut against the storm. His hands were cracked from chopping wood all day. Inside, the fire burned low, throwing weak light on three hungry faces. Emma, 5 years old, sat near the hearth trying to rock her baby sister. Samuel, 3, sucked on his thumb, too tired to cry but too hungry to sleep. The baby, May, whimpered in Emma's arms. Rhett knelt by the fire, tossing in the last of the dry logs. "We'll make it till morning," he muttered, though he didn't believe it. The stew pot was nearly empty, and he hadn't had time to hunt since May had taken sick 2 nights ago. Then came a knock. It was soft at first, then harder, a sound that didn't belong in this storm. Rhett froze, staring at the door. No one should be out here. Not in this weather, not this far from town. He grabbed his rifle and opened the door crack. A woman stood there, thin as a scarecrow, her face white with frost, her shawl crusted in ice. She looked ready to fall over. "I can work," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't want charity." Before he could answer, she collapsed into the snow. Rhett's instincts kicked in. He dropped the rifle, rushed out, and lifted her into his arms. She was light as a sack of feathers, her breath faint but steady, her belly pressed round and hard against his chest. 8 months along, maybe more. He carried her inside, the children staring wide-eyed. Emma clutched May tighter. "Is she dead?" the little girl asked. "No," Rhett said, laying the woman on his bed near the fire. "She's alive." The woman's lips were blue, her skin pale as paper. He wrapped her in blankets and poured a few drops of water between her lips. The children gathered close, watching. When the fire warmed her face, she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, brown, soft, and full of pain. Rhett gave her a tin cup. "Drink slow." She obeyed, though her hands shook so hard the water spilled. "I can work," she whispered again. "I can cook, clean, anything." "You can barely stand," he said, trying not to sound harsh. "I don't want charity." Rhett studied her. Torn shawl, worn boots, no ring, no horse outside. Just a woman who'd walked into a storm because she had nowhere else to go. "I got 3 babies to protect," he warned. Her eyes met his, steady, determined, almost fierce despite her weakness. "Then let me earn my keep." Before he could answer, she slumped back against the pillow and fainted again. By morning, the blizzard had buried the cabin halfway up the windows. Rhett didn't sleep. He sat near the fire, sharpening his knife, watching her breathe. The children woke early. Emma crawled onto the bed beside the woman. Samuel followed, curling against her side like a kitten. Even baby May stopped crying when Rhett laid her near the stranger. "Her name's Willa," Rhett told them quietly after finding a scrap of fabric stitched with the initials WC. Emma brushed the woman's hair from her face. "She's pretty," she whispered, "like the angels in the church window." Rhett tried to smile. "Maybe she is." When Willa finally woke, the first thing she saw were 3 small faces staring at her. Emma offered her a biscuit. Samuel hid behind the blanket. Baby May tugged at her hair and giggled. Willa blinked, confused, then smiled softly. "Hello there." Her hand went to her stomach, round beneath the blanket. She froze, remembering. Then her smile vanished, replaced by fear. She pushed herself up slowly. "I'll make breakfast," she said. "You need rest," Rhett told her. But she was already moving, shaky but stubborn. She stirred the coals, added wood, found the skillet, and began cooking. The smell of frying cornmeal filled the cabin. The children ate like wolves, grinning for the first time in weeks. Rhett watched from the corner, unsure what to make of her. After breakfast, she swept the floor, washed dishes, folded laundry, and even rocked May to sleep. By noon, the cabin looked warmer, cleaner, alive again. Rhett caught himself watching her too long. The way she hummed while stirring stew. the way her voice soothed the children. But there was something else behind her eyes, a weight she carried alone. That night, after the children were asleep, Willa stood by the small mirror on the wall. Her reflection looked older than she remembered, tired, pale, scared. She placed both hands on her belly. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't be what they need." The sound of laughter drifted in from the next room. Emma's soft giggle, Samuel's squeaky laugh, Baby May's happy squeal. Willa's eyes filled with tears. Days turned into weeks. Snow piled higher, then began to melt. Willa stayed. She never asked for thanks or pity. She worked from dawn till night, hauling water, cooking meals, mending clothes. The children followed her everywhere. Rhett kept his distance, though he left small tokens on the porch. A new pair of boots in her size, wildflowers in a jar, stacks of firewood neatly arranged. She never mentioned them, but he noticed she always smiled when she found them. At night, when the house was quiet, he often found himself thinking of his late wife. How she'd once stood in that same kitchen, singing while holding baby Emma. His chest tightened with guilt. He hadn't saved her. He'd been too slow fetching the doctor that winter. She died giving birth to Samuel. He'd sworn never to let another woman near enough to hurt him like that again. But here was Willa, under his roof, making the children laugh, making the house feel like home again. And every time he looked at her, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. One morning, Emma called from the doorway, "Papa, look." Rhett turned. Willa was standing in the yard, shawl fluttering in the wind, laughing as the children chased chickens around the coop. For a moment, he forgot the past, the pain, the loss, the promises he'd made to himself. She looked up, caught his eyes, and smiled. Something inside him shifted. That night, Willa lay awake, listening to the soft breathing of the children beside her. Emma had fallen asleep, holding her hand. Samuel clutched her apron. Baby May's tiny fingers curled around her shawl. She brushed a tear from her cheek. Her baby kicked gently inside her. She whispered to the darkness, "I can't be a mother." From the other room came Rhett's deep voice, humming to the fire. The house was warm, safe. The wind outside eased as if listening. And for the first time since she'd run, Willa allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to stay. 2 months passed, and winter loosened its grip on the Wyoming plains. The snow melted into muddy tracks leading to the barn, and soft sunlight began sneaking through the cabin windows. Willa stayed, working from dawn till dusk, as if she'd been born to belong there. She milked the cow before Rhett woke, washed clothes in icy water, and taught Emma to sew with her small fingers clumsy but eager. Rhett didn't say much, but he showed his thanks in quiet ways. Fresh firewood stacked by the door, wildflowers placed in a chipped mud, a pair of boots left on the porch that fit her perfectly. Willa never spoke of her past, and Rhett never asked. But as the days grew longer, her loose shawl could no longer hide the curve of her belly. She moved slower now, though she tried not to let it show. The children had grown used to her presence. No, more than used to it. They depended on it. One morning, while frying cornmeal cakes, Emma accidentally called her Mama Willa. The word hung in the air like a secret. Emma froze, her eyes wide and wet. Willa's hand trembled, spatula clattering against the skillet. Then she smiled, a small, fragile smile, and opened her arms. Emma ran into them, burying her face in her apron. That night, Samuel refused to sleep until Willa tucked him in, humming an old lullaby her own mother once sang by candlelight. "Mama," he whispered as his eyes closed. Even Baby May began to reach for Willa the moment she entered the room, calling Mama in a soft babble that made everyone laugh. Rhett stood by the door one evening, watching the scene, the 3 children clinging to a woman who'd once claimed she couldn't be a mother. Something inside him broke open. But just as her world began to feel whole, it started to tremble. The longer Willa stayed, the heavier her secret became. The weight of her unborn child reminded her of what she'd run from, and who might still be searching. One night, When the house was asleep and the moon painted the snow silver, she packed a small bundle and wrote a note. "Thank you for giving me a home. I'm not what you think I am. I can't stay." She moved quietly toward the door, heart hammering. But Emma's small voice stopped her. "Are you leaving like our mama did?" Willa froze. Emma stood there in her nightdress, clutching her doll, her face pale with fear. "She went away and never came back," she whispered. "Did we do something bad?" Willa dropped the bundle and fell to her knees, pulling the child close. "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. I'm the one who's broken." Emma's voice trembled. "But Mama, you fixed us." Rhett's shadow filled the doorway. He had heard everything. His face was unreadable, his voice low. "Go back to bed, Emma." When the girl obeyed, he looked at Willa, standing barefoot in the doorway with tears on her face. "You're with child," he said, not as an accusation, but a truth laid bare. She couldn't meet his eyes. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't be a mother." Rhett's tone softened, almost tender. "3 little ones already call you Mama." Her strength crumbled, and the story tumbled out. How she'd run from a violent husband who beat her for carrying his child. How her sister had helped her escape with a handful of money and jewelry, promising to meet her later, only to die of fever before she could. Willa sobbed, saying she had planned to give the baby away, start over where no one knew her name. Rhett stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Then we raised 4 instead of 3. His voice was steady, unshaken, like solid ground beneath her. But Willa shook her head, eyes full of fear. "You don't understand. He'll come for me." Rhett met her gaze with quiet resolve. "Then he'll have to go through me first." The fire crackled between them, and for the first time, Willa didn't feel alone in her fear. Outside, the wind moaned across the plains, but inside that small cabin, something like love began to take root. Fragile, frightened, but real. Spring crept into the Wyoming hills with a softness that should have brought peace. But for Willa, every warm breeze carried the weight of dread. Her belly was round now, her steps slower, yet the children clung to her with a joy that left her torn between love and fear. Rhett's quiet kindness grew into something deeper. Sometimes his hand brushed against hers while she kneaded bread, or he'd place a steady palm on her back when she bent over the washtub, the warmth of his touch saying what neither dared to voice. At night, they'd sit near the fire with the children sprawled around them, Rhett reading from a worn Bible while Emma traced letters on Willa's belly, talking to the baby inside. For a moment, she'd forget that somewhere out there, a man with her name on his papers might still be hunting her. The fear returned whenever hoofbeats echoed across the distant hills, or when she caught sight of riders passing the ridge. Her nights were restless, haunted by dreams of fists and shouts, of being dragged back to a place she'd sworn never to return. Still, the days moved gently until the whispers began. It started in town when Rhett rode in for supplies. "The widow Callahan's taken up with that pregnant stranger," the storekeeper's wife said loud enough for him to hear. "Living in sin, no doubt." The church ladies whispered the same the next Sunday, their voices slicing through the hymns. "She hides her shame under that shawl," one hissed. "That baby probably isn't even her husband's." Emma overheard all and came home with tears streaking her cheeks. "Mrs. Pritchard says you're bad," she cried, her small hands gripping Willa's apron. Willa knelt, wiping the girl's face. "I'm not bad, sweetheart. Just someone who made mistakes." But when she turned away, shame burned her chest. She'd built this fragile peace on borrowed time, and she knew gossip had a way of traveling faster than truth. Then, one afternoon, while Rhett was repairing the barn fence, a lone rider appeared, a man dressed in a fine black coat, polished boots glinting under the sun. His horse was sleek, his face cold and proud. "Mrs. Clayton Whitmore," he said smoothly as he dismounted, hat tipping just enough to mock politeness. Willa went pale. "Clayton," she breathed. Her brother-in-law smiled without warmth. "You didn't think you could disappear forever, did you?" Rhett stepped between them, towering but calm. "You know her? She's my brother's wife," Clayton said. "Ran off with the family's money and jewels. That child she's carrying belongs to my brother's estate. I've come to take her home, or take what she stole." He pulled folded papers from his coat, legal seals shining red. "These are orders from back east. She's unfit, unstable, and in possession of stolen property." Willa's voice shook. "My sister gave me that money before she died. It wasn't theft." Clayton's smirk widened. "Dead women don't testify." He glanced at her belly. "I'll be back with the marshal. 2 weeks, Mrs. Whitmore. Then I take what's mine." His words sliced through the air like a knife. When he rode off, Willa's knees gave out, and Rhett caught her before she hit the ground. That night, she sat before the cracked mirror, the fire flickering behind her, her reflection blurred by tears. "I can't fight him," she whispered. Rhett knelt beside her. "Then I'll fight for you." "You don't understand," she said. "He'll use the law. The law is always on their side." She told him everything, her voice breaking as she revealed the years of abuse she'd endured under Clayton's brother, a man who treated her like property, blaming her for every misfortune, beating her for every empty cradle. "When I finally got with Child," she said, "he said the baby wasn't his. I would have died there if my sister hadn't helped me run." Her voice fell to a whisper. "She gave me her jewelry to sell, her savings. 2 weeks later, she was gone. Fever took her. I never even buried her." Rhett's jaw tightened, his hand covering hers. "That baby is yours. This home is yours. Those children are ours." Willa shook her head, voice small. "The law won't see it that way." "Then the law can go to hell," he said, surprising even himself with the fire in his tone. For the first time, she looked at him without fear. There was strength in his eyes, the kind she'd only seen in people who had lost everything and still chose to hope. But that night, as he slept near the fire, she sat awake, staring at the window. The stars above the prairie shone sharp and cold. She thought of the children sleeping in the next room, of Emma's little arms around her neck, of Samuel's soft breathing, of baby May's hand curled around her finger. And then her hand went to her belly, where life fluttered weakly beneath her palm. She loved them all. God help her, she loved them too much to let Clayton destroy them. By dawn, her mind was made up. She'd leave before the marshal came. She'd take nothing but the clothes on her back, find somewhere far away to give birth, and send a letter later when it was safe. The morning light spilled through the window, gentle and cruel all at once. Rhett was outside splitting wood when Willow watched him from the doorway, memorizing his face, the scar along his jaw, the way his shirt clung to his shoulders, the steadiness in his every motion. He looked up and caught her staring. She smiled faintly, forcing it, before turning away. He frowned, sensing something wrong, but before he could speak, Emma came running out with a flower crown she'd made. "Mama, look, for you." Willa knelt, taking it with trembling hands. "It's beautiful," she whispered, kissing the girl's forehead. "Keep it safe for me, all right?" Emma giggled, not knowing those words were goodbye. That evening, when the sky turned orange and the children were tucked in, Willa folded a note and placed it on Rhett's desk. "I love you too much to destroy you. Please forgive me." She stood for a long time beside the cradle, brushing May's curls from her forehead, pressing kisses to each child's sleeping face. Her tears fell quietly, lost in their warmth. Then she slipped out into the dark, shawl pulled tight around her swollen belly, walking toward the horizon where her past, and perhaps her punishment, waited. Behind her, the cabin's windows glowed golden in the distance, a light she'd never forget. Inside, Rhett stirred in his chair, waking to the faint cry of the wind and to the sound of the front door clicking shut. The sky was black when Willa left, a bitter wind rising over the plains as if warning her to turn back. Her shawl clung to her body, heavy with melting snow, but she pressed on toward the distant hills where no one would find her. Behind her, The cabin light faded into the storm until it was only a memory. She walked until her feet blistered and her breath came in gasps. She had told herself it was better this way, to leave before the law came, before Clayton could hurt the children or destroy Rhett's life. But every step away from that cabin felt like tearing her own heart in two. When dawn broke, the world was gray and cold, and her body ached with the first signs of labor. She found an old church half buried by snow, its roof sagging, windows broken, but the door still standing. Inside, she collapsed by the altar, clutching her belly, whispering prayers that dissolved into sobs. Back at the ranch, Rhett woke to the sound of silence. Willa's note lay on his desk, her handwriting trembling across the paper. "I love you too much to destroy you." His chest tightened as he read it again and again, unable to believe she was gone. When he stepped outside, the air was thick with the smell of snow. Emma stood on the porch in her nightdress, holding the flower crown Willa had worn the day before. "She's gone, isn't she?" the little girl whispered. Rhett knelt beside her, trying to find words, but none came. Inside, Samuel sat mute, refusing to eat, while baby May cried until her tiny body shook. Neighbors came, offering food and comfort, but the children rejected them all. Emma's eyes were fierce with grief when she faced Rhett. "You let her go," she shouted, pounding her small fists against his chest. "You let her leave, just like Mama. You didn't fight for her." Her words hit harder than any blow. Rhett stumbled back, haunted by the same guilt that had crushed him for years. The memory of his first wife dying in childbirth because he hadn't brought the doctor fast enough. He had promised himself he would never fail again, but here he was, watching another woman he loved vanish into a storm. He stood, jaw tight, and said softly, "I won't make that mistake twice." He saddled his horse before sunrise, the wind biting through his coat, snow already falling. He left the children in the care of Mrs. Henderson next door, though their cries followed him down the frozen path. The blizzard thickened, erasing tracks, but Rhett rode on, scanning the horizon for any sign of her. For hours, there was nothing, just white silence and the sound of his horse's hooves crunching through ice. Then he saw it, a broken trail leading toward the old church at the edge of the valley. Smoke curled weakly from its chimney. He dismounted, pushed through the heavy door, and froze at the sight before him. Willa was there, lying on the cold floor, her face pale, her hands clutching her swollen belly. "I can't do this," she gasped through clenched teeth. "I can't be what they need." Rhett dropped to his knees beside her, his coat still covered in snow. "You don't have to do it alone," he said softly. Her eyes met his wide, desperate, but full of something that looked like relief. The pain came in waves, tearing through her body. Rhett had delivered calves and foals before, but this was different. This was life itself, fragile and fierce. He tore a blanket in half, built a small fire in the hearth, and held her hand as each contraction racked her body. She screamed, sobbed, cursed herself, and clung to him. "I can't," she cried again. "You can," he said firmly, brushing her sweat-soaked hair from her face. "You fed Emma when nightmares kept her awake. You taught Samuel his letters when I couldn't. You sang me to sleep every night until she stopped crying." His voice shook. "You've been a mother since the day you walked through my door." Her tears fell freely now, her body trembling. The baby was coming fast. Rhett guided her through each push, his voice steady, his hand sure. When the child's cry finally filled the church, it was like the storm itself paused to listen. Willa collapsed back, sobbing with relief as Rhett wrapped the tiny girl in his coat. "She's healthy," he whispered. "Strong lungs." Willa reached for the baby with trembling arms. "Hope," she said through tears. "Her name is Hope." Rhett smiled, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Then Hope it is." He kissed her forehead gently, a promise in that touch more powerful than words. Outside, the storm began to break, lights seeping through the cracks in the church walls. Rhett lifted Willa, baby in her arms, and carried them to his horse. "Let's go home," he said. "All 4 children are waiting." The ride back was slow and quiet, the snow glittering under the pale dawn. When they reached the cabin, Emma burst from the door, followed by Samuel and May. "Mama!" she screamed, running across the yard. Rhett barely dismounted before the children surrounded Willa, their little hands reaching for the baby. "Her name's Hope," Willa whispered, voice breaking as Emma touched her sister's cheek. "I'll protect her like you protected us," Emma said solemnly. Rhett's throat tightened as he watched the scene. This broken woman surrounded by love she thought she didn't deserve. But peace didn't last long. The next morning, as the snow melted into muddy ruts, the sound of horses echoed from the ridge. Rhett stepped outside, rifle in hand, as Clayton returned, this time with 2 men and the town marshal. "Thought I'd find you here," Clayton said, his voice dripping with triumph. Willa stood on the porch, baby Hope in her arms, her face pale but steady. "You can't have her," Rhett warned. Clayton smirked. "We'll see what the law says." The marshal, a kind-faced man with tired eyes, stepped forward. "Mr. Callahan, I don't want trouble. I just need to hear her side." Willa clutched the baby tighter. "My sister gave me that money. She's dead, and he wants revenge." Clayton's sneer deepened. "And to claim what's mine. That child belongs to my brother's name, not to this ranch hand." Rhett's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. The marshal looked torn. "Ma'am, you'll need to come into town tomorrow to make a statement. I'll give you till then." Clayton leaned close, whispering, "Enjoy your little fairy tale while it lasts. Tomorrow, I take what's owed." As he rode off, Willa turned to Rhett, her heart pounding. "I can't let him take her. I can't let him destroy what we've built." Rhett cupped her face gently. "Then he won't. Not while I'm breathing." She nodded, holding baby Hope close. The children huddled around her, and for the first time since the night she'd arrived in the storm, Willa didn't feel like a runaway. She felt like a mother defending her home. The wind outside had gone still, but inside the cabin, the air thrummed with quiet resolve. She had fled from pain, run from fear, and nearly lost everything. But now she understood what Rhett had seen all along. She wasn't weak. She wasn't broken. She was Hope's mother, Emma's heart, Samuel's calm, and May's song. And this time, when danger came riding, she wouldn't run. The morning sun rose blood red over the Wyoming horizon, painting the valley in shades of fire and frost. Rhett stood outside the cabin, his rifle slung across his shoulder, waiting for what he knew was coming. Inside, Willis sat by the hearth, baby Hope in her arms, the children clinging to her skirts. The calm before the storm was almost worse than the storm itself. They had barely slept. Emma had cried herself into exhaustion. Samuel had nightmares. And even little May had refused to close her eyes until Rhett promised everything would be all right. But as the thunder of hooves grew closer, every promise felt fragile. Clayton arrived first, dressed in his fine black coat again, his smug smile hidden under the shadow of his hat. Behind him came the town marshal and 2 other men. "Morning, Mr. Callahan," the marshal said, polite but tense. "We need to settle this matter peacefully." Rhett didn't answer. Willis stepped forward, pale but steady, Hope wrapped tightly in a blanket. Clayton dismounted, brushing invisible dust from his coat as he spoke with the kind of arrogance that could only come from a man certain the world was built to serve him. "There she is," he said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Mrs. Clayton Whitmore, runaway wife, thief, liar, and unfit mother. I warned you I'd come back with the law." Rhett's voice was low but sharp. "She's not your concern anymore." "Not mine," Clayton sneered. "She's carrying my brother's child. That baby's part of our family, our estate. The law says so." The marshal unfolded the papers, his brow furrowed. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you deny taking money and jewelry from your husband's home?" Willa's fingers trembled, but her voice did not. "No, I don't deny it. My sister gave them to me to start a new life after helping me escape. She died soon after. I didn't steal anything." Clayton laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. And we're supposed to take the word of a runaway over mine? Don't be foolish, Marshall. The woman's unstable. Look at her, living with a widower, bearing another man's child. Immoral, indecent. She belongs in court, not here pretending to be somebody's wife. Rhett stepped closer, his presence like a wall of stone. You're standing in my home, on my land, talking about the woman who saved my children. Watch your mouth. Clayton's smirk faltered for a second, but quickly returned. You can't protect her from the law, cowboy. She'll come with us, or you'll face obstruction charges. The marshal sighed, clearly torn. Mr. Callahan, please. Let's not turn this into bloodshed. The law's the law. Rhett glanced at Willa, then at his children peering from behind her skirts. He saw their fear, the same fear he'd once seen in Willa's eyes the night she arrived. He took a deep breath, lowering his rifle slightly. You say the law's the law, he said, but sometimes the law forgets to look at the truth. The noise from the road grew. Word had spread fast. Half the town had gathered by now. Neighbors, ranchers, and shopkeepers lined the fence, watching silently as the confrontation unfolded. Willa's heart pounded as faces she knew, some kind, some judgmental, appeared among the crowd. Mrs. Henderson, the widow who often helped with the children, stepped forward first. Marshall, she said firmly, this woman nursed my boy through scarlet fever. Sat up 3 nights straight when the doctor said he wouldn't make it. You calling that unfit? Next came old Mr. Tucker, his cane tapping against the hard ground. She taught my grandson to read when the school said he wasn't smart enough, he said, glaring at Clayton. Doesn't sound like a thief to me. Then, to everyone's surprise, Mrs. Pritchard, the same church lady who had once called Willa a sinner, spoke up. Her voice trembled, but carried weight. I was wrong about her, she said. She's done more good for this town than most of us. I've seen her kindness. I've seen her love those children like her own. The marshal shifted uncomfortably. This isn't about character, he said. This is a question of legal rights. But even he sounded uncertain. Then a small voice cut through the air. She is our mama, Emma said, stepping forward with trembling hands. Baby Hope cradled carefully in her arms. The crowd parted for her. Her cheeks were flushed with courage, her small chin lifted high. She chose us when she didn't have to, she said. Blood don't make you family. Love does. The words were simple, but they struck everyone silent. Samuel, who hadn't spoken since Willa's disappearance days ago, stepped up beside her, clutching a folded piece of paper. He opened it and held it out to the marshal. It was a childish drawing, 6 stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. In big, uneven letters, the word family was written across the top. Mama sings to me, Samuel said softly. She makes the bad dreams go away. She's our family. Baby May, who had been clinging to Rhett's leg, suddenly reached for Willa, crying, Mama, Mama. The sound was raw, pure, and impossible to ignore. Even the marshal's eyes softened as he cleared his throat. Well, he said after a long pause, I can't speak for the courts back east, but I know what I see right now. And I see a mother. Clayton's face turned red. This is ridiculous, he spat. These people don't decide the law. Willa's voice rose, clear and steady for the first time. You're right, she said, but I do decide who I am. She stepped forward, her body still weak from childbirth, but her spirit unshakable. I came here broken, thinking I'd never be enough. These children taught me I was wrong. I'm not running anymore. I'm their mother. And that money you talk about? My sister gave me my freedom. I wanted to honor her by giving it back to the family that bought and sold me. The marshal nodded slowly, folding the papers. No crime in starting over, Mrs. Whitmore. As far as I'm concerned, this case is closed. The baby stays with her mother. Cheers erupted from the crowd, but Clayton's fury only deepened. You think this is over? He hissed. I'll bring new charges. You'll be ruined. The courts will strip that bastard child from her arms. Rhett stepped forward before anyone could react. Then, in front of the whole town, he dropped to one knee. The crowd went silent. "Marry me," he said, his voice low but strong. "Not because you have to, Willa. Because you belong here, with me, with them. Because 4 children already call you Mama, and I can't imagine tomorrow without you." Willa stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "Rhett," she whispered, "you don't have to do this." He smiled faintly. "I know. That's why I want to." The crowd held its breath. Even the marshal smiled now. "Seems like a fine way to make things right," he said, "and it'll shut this fool up faster than any law could." Clayton's jaw clenched as the townspeople began to cheer. "You'll regret this," he growled. "You'll never escape your past." Rhett stood, meeting his glare. "Maybe not, but at least we'll face it together." He turned to the marshal. "How soon can we make it official?" 48 hours, the marshal replied. "You'll need a preacher and witnesses." "Then we'll do it tomorrow," Rhett said. "At dawn." Willa nodded, still crying, clutching hope to her chest as if she feared the moment might vanish. Clayton glared, mounting his horse. "Enjoy your little show," he sneered, "but the law won't stay on your side forever." He spurred his horse and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. As the sound faded, Rhett turned to the crowd. "Thank you," he said simply, "for standing with us." The townspeople began to drift away, murmuring blessings and congratulations. Mrs. Pritchard approached Willa, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I used to think the Lord tested us with hardship," she said softly. "But sometimes he tests us with love to see if we'll believe we deserve it." Willa smiled through her tears. When everyone had gone, Rhett led her back inside the cabin. The children followed, still buzzing with excitement. Emma climbed onto Willa's lap, careful not to disturb the baby. "Are you really getting married?" she asked. Willa brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. We're finally going to be a family, properly." Rhett leaned against the doorway, his heart full for the first time in years. Yet beneath his joy, a flicker of unease lingered. They had 48 hours before the wedding, and Clayton was not a man to give up easily. Still, as night fell over the ranch, the fire burned brighter than it ever had. Willa rocked baby Hope while the others slept, whispering a prayer of thanks for the love she'd found in the most unlikely place. Tomorrow, she would stand before God and the town as a wife and mother, not as a runaway. But in her heart, she already was both. And no law, no threat, no past could take that away. The next morning dawned clear and golden, the kind of morning Wyoming saved for miracles. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp, the mountains shining white in the distance. Inside the cabin, the smell of fresh bread filled the air, and Willa moved quietly through the kitchen, her shawl tied neatly around her shoulders. Today she would become a wife again, but not a possession, not a secret kept behind closed doors. This time, she would stand in the open sunlight, beside a man who saw her not as something to own, but as someone to fight for. Rhett stood by the doorway, shirt pressed, hair combed, his jaw freshly shaven. His usual roughness softened with something like boyish nervousness. The children darted between them, Emma in her little white dress, Samuel wearing Rhett's old suspenders, May carrying flower petals in a wooden bowl, and baby Hope gurgling in Willa's arms, wrapped in a soft pink cloth. The preacher from town had agreed to marry them on the porch, with the neighbors gathered as witnesses. Mrs. Henderson arrived first with a pie, followed by Mr. Tucker, who leaned heavily on his cane but refused to miss the wedding of the year, as he called it. Even Mrs. Pritchard came, bringing a bouquet of wildflowers as an unspoken apology. The ceremony was simple, but in that simplicity was everything they'd been fighting for. Willa stood facing Rhett, the wind playing with her hair, the sky endless above them. The preacher's voice carried steady over the plains. "Do you, Rhett Callahan, take this woman?" "I do," Rhett said before the words had even finished. A ripple of laughter ran through the small crowd. "To be your lawful wife, to honor and cherish her, in sickness and in health." Until death do you part? I do, he repeated, his eyes never leaving Willa's. And do you, Willa Whitmore, take this man to be your husband, to love and honor him and the family you share? Willa's eyes glistened with tears that caught the morning light like diamonds. I do, she whispered, with all that I am. She looked at the children gathered close. I promise to be the mother they deserve and the partner you need. Rhett's voice grew thick when he answered, and I promise to protect all 5 of you until my last breath. Emma clapped her hands, shouting, "Kiss her, Papa." The crowd chuckled as Rhett leaned in, pressing a tender kiss to Willa's lips, sealing not just vows but years of pain into something new and whole. The children cheered. May threw her petals into the air. Samuel puffed his chest proudly, and even baby Hope squealed with delight. It was the first sound of pure happiness that seemed to echo forever in that valley. As the small crowd celebrated, the townsfolk shared food, laughter, and warmth. Even those who once whispered against are now smiling genuinely. The preacher blessed them one final time. May this home always have light. May its walls be strong, and may love be the roof above you. When the guests left, Rhett stood on the porch with Willa beside him, watching the horizon. "You're not afraid anymore," he said softly. "No," she answered. "I'm home." 6 months passed, and summer gave way to the amber calm of early autumn. The ranch thrived again, the fields rich with hay, the cattle strong, the fences mended, and laughter echoing every day from sunrise to sundown. Willa's life became a rhythm she hadn't known she could have. Each morning she woke before the sun, baby Hope cooing beside her, and the smell of coffee filling the air as Rhett came in from the fields. Emma, now 6, sat at the kitchen table helping her mother teach the younger ones their letters, proudly reading aloud from a worn Bible. Samuel followed Rhett everywhere, trying to carry buckets bigger than himself, his face smudged with dust and pride. May, now a spirited 2-year-old, was the center of every noise and giggle, always clinging to Willa's skirt or singing nonsense songs to the baby. Hope, now 6 months old, had her father's calm gray eyes and her mother's gentle smile. She was a living reminder of all that had been lost and all that had been found again. Evenings were their favorite time. Rhett would tell stories by the fire, his deep voice weaving tales of his younger days on the frontier, while the children listened with eyes wide, curled in their blankets. Willa would sew quietly beside him, baby Hope asleep in her lap, her heart full every time their eyes met across the flickering light. Sometimes, after the children were asleep, Rhett would pull her close and whisper, "I don't remember what life was before you." And she would whisper back, "Maybe it hadn't started yet." Then, one crisp evening, as the wind began to shift and the scent of rain carried over the plains, another knock came at the door. Willa froze, her hands covered in flour, a chill racing down her spine. Rhett glanced at her, his hand automatically reaching for the rifle leaning near the door. The knock came again, softer this time, weaker. He opened the door slowly, the lantern's light spilling across the porch. There stood a young woman, barely more than 20, her dress torn, her hair plastered to her face from the storm, her arms wrapped protectively around a small, swollen belly. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I need help. I have nowhere to go." Behind her, thunder rumbled across the plains. Willa's breath caught. For a second, she was back in that storm 2 years ago, standing on another doorstep, begging for a chance to live. The children appeared behind her, their faces filled with wonder and recognition. Rhett looked to Willa, and in that glance, everything was decided. Willa stepped forward, opening the door wide. "Come in," she said gently. "You're safe here." The young woman blinked, tears spilling down her cheeks as she stumbled inside. "We have food," Willa added softly, "and family." The woman collapsed by the fire, too exhausted to speak. Emma ran to fetch a blanket. Samuel brought warm milk, and May patted the stranger's shoulder with a child's pure compassion. Willa knelt beside her, pressing a comforting hand to her back. "You're safe," she repeated. "Rest now." It was a full circle no one missed. The same mercy Willa had once been given now flowing through her to someone else. Later that night, when the storm outside had calmed and the house was silent, Willa and Rhett sat on the porch wrapped in one blanket. The stars stretched wide above them, cold and bright. "We can't save everyone," Willa said quietly, her eyes still watching the sleeping figure by the fire through the window. Rhett's arm tightened around her shoulders. "No," he said, "but we can save someone. Like I saved you." Willa smiled faintly, her head resting against his shoulder. "Like the children saved me," she whispered. "They gave me a reason to stay." Rhett kissed her hair. "Then we keep doing it," he said. "We keep the door open." She nodded slowly. "This ranch isn't just ours anymore," she said. "It's for anyone who's lost, anyone who needs a home." Rhett smiled into the darkness. "Then that's what it will be." In that moment, under the silver light of the stars, a new purpose was born. Not just for them, but for every soul that might one day find their way to that porch. Later that night, when everyone slept, Willa sat at the small table near the window with a journal open before her. The lamplight glowed softly, and her pen moved across the paper with slow, thoughtful strokes. "Dear sister," she wrote, "I hope you can see me now." Her hand trembled, but her words were steady. "I arrived here pregnant, broken, convinced I couldn't be a mother. Rhett told me 3 little ones already call me mama. I didn't believe him. I thought motherhood was something you earned through perfection, through birth or blood. But I was wrong. Motherhood isn't about where you come from. It's about who you choose to stay for. It's about love that doesn't count the cost, love that gets up when the world says you can't. Thank you for giving me freedom. I used it to build a family. For children call me mama now, and one more is coming." She paused, laying a hand gently on her belly. This time there was no fear, only quiet joy. She closed the journal, whispering, "We're home." The next morning was alive with chaos, the kind that made her heart warm. The smell of coffee and biscuits filled the cabin. Emma sat at the table, feeding Hope mashed apples, her hair tied in a loose braid, just like Willa's. Samuel practiced tying knots beside Rhett, determined to be as strong as his father. May banged her spoon on the table, demanding more jam, while the young woman from the night before sat nearby, still timid but smiling softly as she ate. "Eat all you want," Willa said kindly, handing her another biscuit. "There's plenty." Rhett entered with his usual grin, sweeping baby Hope into his arms and kissing her cheek, his eyes lingering on Willa with quiet pride. She moved through the kitchen with her belly round beneath her apron, glowing with new life. Everything felt full, rich, and complete. Emma folded her hands, glancing around the table. "Let's say grace," she said brightly. Everyone quieted as her small voice filled the room. "Thank you for this food," she began. "Thank you for our house. Thank you for Mama who stayed, and for Papa who opened the door." "Amen," everyone echoed. The room filled with laughter and chatter, the kind of noise that meant home. Through the window, the sun rose over the fields, bathing the ranch in gold. The camera of imagination pulled back, showing the cabin, a small speck of warmth against the endless plains, a beacon of love in a world that had forgotten mercy. And as if spoken from the wind itself, a voice lingered softly, carrying Willa's story into the hearts of all who would hear it. She whispered, "I can't be a mother." He smiled softly. "3 little ones already call you mama." She hadn't believed him then. But now, with 5 children around her table and another on the way, she finally understood. She'd been a mother from the moment she chose to stay. If Willa's journey from broken runaway to mother of many touched your heart, share her story with someone who needs hope. Because out here, under the wide western sky, family isn't just about blood. It's about who stays when everyone else leaves. And for Willa Callahan, that truth was the only one that ever mattered.